What do the clobber passages of the Bible say about homosexuality? I'm talking about Leviticus chapter 20, Romans chapter 1. These are the popular ones. If you say that the Bible doesn't say anything about homosexuality, people are going to throw those two verses up in front of you. But what do they say? First, what does Leviticus, let's go Old Testament, what does Leviticus chapter 20, verse 13 say? It says, if a man has sexual relations with a man, as one does with a woman, both of them have done what is detestable. They are to be put to death. Their blood will be on their heads. Well, that's pretty clear. That's that's from King James, I believe, is the Bible. King James came out in 1611, and people say that it's talking about pedophilia, talking about men and children, young boys, and pedophilia. It's not really. But stick with me. People will say it's not just the Old Testament that is against homosexuals. It's the New Testament also. They'll say, what about Romans? What about Timothy? What about Corinthians? Corinthians was changed by the RSV. Anyway, what about Romans chapter 1, verse 26? For this cause God gave them up unto vile affections, for even their women did change the natural use into that which is against nature. That was verse 26, verse 27. And likewise also the men, leaving the natural use of the woman, burned in their lust toward one another, men with men, working that which is unseemly, and receiving in themselves that recompense of their error, which obviously the King James. This was changed in 1946, when the RSV came out. The King James Version said obviously nothing about homosexuality, but the RSV came out, and it started putting the word homosexuality and homosexual into the clobber passages. And what's that about? I mean, what it did was, it took, likewise also the men, leaving the natural use of the woman, burned in their lust toward another, men with men, working what is unseemly, and women did change natural use into that. And people said that must mean homosexuality. That's what else could it mean? It's got to be in homosexuality. So the Revised Standard Version in 1946 inserted homosexuality, and it did it throughout the Bible. Think about that though. What homosexuality is a man being attracted to a man, or a woman being attracted to a woman. Let's just go ahead and throw in transgender people, everything in here, intersex, everything. Let's go ahead and throw it in. But what is this? It is known, biblical scholars say that when Paul was writing Romans and 1 Corinthians and Timothy, that he was heavily influenced by what he thought Leviticus said. It says, if a man has sexual relations with a man as one does with a woman, both of them have done what is detestable. It doesn't say anything about if a woman has sexual relations with another woman, that she's done what is detestable. If it was talking about gay people, trans people, if it was talking about them, is it giving women a break? Well, you would say in Romans there, it says women too traded natural things. For this cause God gave them up unto vile affections, for even their women did change the natural use into that. Wait a minute. Burned in lust toward one another. Men, also the men, leaving the natural use of the woman. Women, changing the natural use to that which is against nature. Use. Is that what my wedding night, let's say I was a virgin until my wedding night. Anyway, that night, did I go into the tent and of my mother and use my wife? Is that what Jacob did? Did he go into the tent and use his wife? Did the woman go into the tent of her mother or Jacob's mother or whatever and make use of his wife, her husband? Is that what happened? That's what Romans is talking about. And likewise also the men, leaving the natural use of the woman, and the women did change the natural use. That doesn't sound like somebody was attracted to somebody else. But you're saying, let's go back to Leviticus. If a man has sexual relations with a man, as one does with a woman, both of them have done what is detestable. That's your basic man shall not lie with man as he does with woman. Paul, like I said, was heavily influenced by Leviticus when he wrote Romans, Corinthians, and Timothy. So what Paul thought this meant was that men were using other men instead of women for sex. Were women using other women? Well, I don't think so. Leviticus 20, verse 13. I've read it 5 times already. Verse 13. Let's go down to verse 16. If a woman approaches an animal to have sexual relations with it, kill both the woman and the animal. They are to be put to death. So men were using women. Men were using men. Not, like I said, it doesn't say anything about pedophiles, but men were using men for sex when they should have been using women. Like Judah went and found a prostitute, which is heavily frowned upon. Men were using men for sex. Women were not doing that. It doesn't say anything about homosexual women, gay women, transgender women, transgender men. It just doesn't say that because that's not what it means. If a woman approaches an animal, she is to be put to death. That is right after the verse, if a man has sexual relations with a man. All right. But the Bible says, if you look at the Bible now, you're going to find that men, when it said men were using other men, that it was obviously talking about homosexual. The whole word homosexual is right there in the verse. How did that happen? Because the word homosexual, meaning men falling in love with another men, not, I don't think, using other men, except in prisons where homosexuality is not rampant, but men using other men is rampant. How did homosexual get in the Bible? 1611, King James Version, wasn't there. People would say, yeah, well, that's because homosexual is an English word, and that's why it's not in the earlier versions. Duh. Yes, homosexual is an English word. People will say, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Because it says man shall not lie with man, and we know it's talking about homosexuality. How do we know that it's talking about homosexuality? Because if you look in the Bible, it says homosexuality. It said men using men as they used to use women. Obviously that means homosexual. No, it does not. Women, it's talking about gay women too. It says they traded. And in Leviticus it says if a woman approaches an animal to have sexual relations, in Leviticus, it's talking about the use of something for sex. And this is what Paul was talking about when he was influenced by Leviticus. But I'm dancing around the subject. How did who decided those phrases men homosexuality, gay people, and not men raping other men, men having sex with male prostitutes, women having sex, as was common. It says it in Leviticus. They should not do it. Paul didn't really touch on it. He just said women were trading natural uses for sex, and they should have been using men, and actually they were using animals. And anyway, 1946 comes along, and the editors of the RSV, the Revised Standard Version, read that, and they said, you know what? If a man uses a man for sex, that's talking about gay people. That's what they said. All right. And 1946, 1958 came along, and the Old Testament was completed. It was all brought in. The first edition of the RSV, Revised Standard Version, was completed. And it said homosexual. It replaced men sleeping with men, and it said, the RSV said, that's talking about homosexuality. Can't be talking about anything else. But it wasn't it? What happened? As soon as the RSV did that, other versions of the Bible jumped on the same bandwagon. They said, yes, finally, somebody is interpreting the Bible the way we're interpreting. Somebody changed the Bible to say what we wanted to say. Right after World War II, they did that. They changed the Bible. Are you pretty happy about them changing the Bible? Now, was it? Did they? How much thought did they put into it? Into this change? Well, in 1971, the second edition of the RSV, Revised Standard Version. Yeah. Anyway, the second edition came out, and they took the word homosexual completely out of the Bible. They thought about it quite a bit the second time, and they decided that was a mistake. You can't say that men having sex with men like men did with prostitutes then, like men in prisons do now. Prisons are not full of gay men. If prisons were full of gay men, tender and loving, you might think that men, and in fact I know from comments that some of you do think that men go into prisons and they're all turning gay. They're wearing yellow blouses and pink sweaters, and they like to watch Barbie the movie. And no, that's not happening. They are using other men for sex, the same way they did when Leviticus was written, in the same way that women aren't raping other women, because women aren't able to take the penetrative role. But women, when they had sex, apparently in Leviticus, were getting together with animals. But bottom line, the RSV put it in 1946. 1958, the Old Testament came out. They thought about it deeply, and the editors of the RSV said, that's not right. We were wrong. And they took it back out. It didn't cause a big stink about that, because I think it was a little, Old Testament, New Testament, Old Second Edition. But when the new RSV came out, the NRSV came out, it was, and in 1989, it was really a big problem, because lots of other versions of the Bible followed the RSV's lead, and they put homosexual in the Bible, making them look kind of bad. RSV said we shouldn't have put it in there. Other editors, other versions of the Bible got furious, saying that the RSV had no right to take it out of the Bible, homosexuality. The RSV editors were the ones who put homosexuality in there. So why didn't they have the right to take it out? Why, when Paul wrote Romans, being influenced by Leviticus, saying that men were sleeping with men, meaning that men, instead said men were using men for sex. Women were not using women for sex. Women were using animals for sex. He was heavily influenced by Leviticus, and Leviticus said men shouldn't sleep with men. That's what we're talking about. Nothing about homosexuality at all until 1946 when it was changed. Men should not sleep with men. Women should not sleep with animals. Did it mean that gay women were marrying animals? No, it did not. Did it mean that gay men were using each other? No, it did not. Were gay men women even around back then? Of course they were. Why doesn't the Bible ever talk about, before 1946, gay men and gay women? Why doesn't it ever talk about gay women at all? Because it's not talking about homosexual relations. It's talking about men having sex with sheep. It's talking about women, or talking about men having sex with men. And it's talking about women having sex with sheep and dogs and giraffes and what have you. And God didn't like it. Does God say anything about homosexuality in the Bible? No, he does not. Does God say anything about bestiality? He says quite a bit. He's got a problem with that. Does God say anything about rape like occurs in prisons nowadays? Yes, he does say quite a bit about rape. People, we're not through here. That's only 2 clobber passages. Buckle up.